Third wave grips India.
So let's begin first with the COVID-19 pandemic and the restrictions that are in place or lifted across India. First for Delhi, the national capital, weekend curfew will remain in Delhi despite a decline in the daily COVID caseload. Delhi Lieutenant Governor Anil Baijal has decided to turn down the government's recommendation to lift the weekend curfew at least. However, the Lieutenant Governor has suggested, and I quote him here, the status quo be maintained with regards to the weekend curfew and opening of the markets in Delhi till the COVID-19 situation improves further. What does this mean? That the weekend curfew will remain in force from 10 a.m. on Friday and till Monday 5 a.m. as well. As you can see on your screens, the positivity rate is also coming down. Delhi Health Minister Satyendra Jain has asserted that the COVID-19 situation in Delhi is in control. Daily cases are expected to go down further, but for now, some restrictions have been lifted, but mainly the weekend curfew is still in place in Delhi.
तो दिल्ली के अंदर नंबर ऑफ केसेस भी कम हो रहे हैं, पॉजिटिविटी भी कम हो रही है, इस टाइम काफ़ी कंट्रोल में है। और जो एक्सपर्ट्स का कहना था पहले कि दिल्ली के अंदर 1 लाख केसेस भी पर डे आ सकते हैं, अब वो खतरा टल गया है। 28,000 पर आने के बाद, पीक आने के बाद अब तेज़ी से केस नीचे गिर रहे हैं और पॉजिटिविटी भी तेज़ी से 30% से जाने के बाद घटते घटते 17-18% पे आ गई है। तो दिल्ली के अंदर पीक जा चुका है और केसेस कम हो रहे हैं।
So if you are a resident of Delhi, here's what you need to know. The curfew, which is the weekend curfew, will remain in place from 10 at Friday to 5 a.m. on Monday morning. The odd-even rule that many shopkeepers and traders were asking to be removed is still in place. The odd-even scheme for shops and marketplaces continues. What about Delhi buses and also the metro rails? The Delhi buses and metro will now run at full capacity. So the transportation is getting that curb lifted. What about the private offices that were shut last week? Private offices can now reopen at about 50% capacity. And of course, people who want to go out, want to dine in, enjoy with their families, pubs and restaurants can reopen, but only at 50% capacity for now. And what if you want to go ahead and watch films with your families in the cinema halls? Cinema halls and malls again can run, but at 50% capacity. On your screens, of course, you can look at one by one how there are different curbs that have been lifted or some recommendation and suggestions are made. Essential services, of course, are exempt from all COVID curbs, specifically from the health sector, that they will not have to follow any of these restrictions. So some curbs there in Delhi, some have got 50% capacity. Let's go across on the ground. My colleague Mohit Sharma has been tracking all the latest. He's been reporting constantly on COVID pandemic. Mohit, of course, I know many shopkeepers wanted a complete lifting of the odd-even scheme. That's not happening. But how is these suggestions that have come up, how are these restrictions have been lifted? What is the basis of that? Do tell us, and what is the ground situation in Delhi? If you can, okay, we are also now joined by Amit Bhardwaj for the latest. Amit, if you can tell me what is the status on the ground, what are the numbers, and because you also have been telling us consistently about the restrictions that DDMA lifted. Are people happy with the lifted curbs, or there was a certain section, specifically the marketplace owners and traders, who wanted the odd-even scheme to go specifically?
Well, Pooja, the DDMA order that has been issued today has, done away with a couple of restrictions, but majority of the restrictions which were imposed in light of the spike or surge of the COVID cases in the national capital, that remains there, and that is the reason that market associations and different business groups of the national capital continue to remain unhappy. In fact, different associations have already sent out letters to the Lieutenant Governor, to Delhi Chief Minister, asking for easing off of the norms, and specifically, norms such as the odd-even formula. We know for a matter of fact that at different marketplaces in the Delhi, the shops are allowed to open and operate only in odd even formula. That means the shops with odd numbers are allowed to open on odd days and shops with even numbers are allowed to operate on the even days. So all the market associations have already again appealed to the Lieutenant Governor and Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal seeking the easing off of these restrictions. Along with that, we had also seen that Delhi Gym Association and the fitness centers, representatives of the fitness centers approaching the Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal and seeking for reopening of these places. So clearly the DDMA order which has been issued today, it has done away with a couple of restrictions, but majorly the major restrictions such as whether it be the night curfew or the weekend curfew, such restrictions remain in place, and in restrictions which were imposed to reduce crowding in the marketplaces, those restrictions are still in place.
Yes.
And possibly the reason for this, this is the way DDMA order has been passed today, that the restrictions continue to be there. Possibly the only reason for that is the positivity rate has not gone down drastically, and the death toll
and
that Delhi is
therefore,
witnessing
Amit, what you are telling us, the death toll is still on due to COVID-19. Positivity rate is not so sharp a decline, which means that if you're a Delhi resident and you have some restrictions lifted, still follow all precautions. This is temporary. The restrictions can come back anytime by the Delhi authorities if they realize that the numbers are again witnessing a spike. Thank you so much. So, Amit Bhardwaj for all the latest on that. So, despite a decline in COVID cases across Delhi, fatalities have also doubled in the national capital within a week, which means the week ending January 12 witnessed 119 deaths. The next week saw over 200 deaths. Here's a report why you must know that while the hospitalization may be low, there are people dying of COVID-19 and for different reasons associated with it, especially comorbidity.
(12,306 cases in 24 hours. 21.48% test positivity rate. The COVID graph in Delhi is showing a decline. While active cases have surged, the capital's health infrastructure is not feeling any pressure, unlike the second wave. The Union Health Ministry says even when the active caseload rose to 75,000, hospital admissions stayed in the 1,600 to 2,600 range.
We have noted an increasing uptake of home tests being observed. In the whole of 2021, we saw only 3,000 home tests that were used. And in these 20 days, we have seen 2 lakh home tests which have been used.
The one cause for concern is deaths. The city recorded 43 deaths on Thursday. A close look at the Delhi government's health department data reveals that in the last 1 week, over 200 people lost their lives to COVID. While between January 6th and January 12th, Delhi recorded nearly 119 deaths. The next week saw 220 fatalities. Health experts, however, say that a majority of these patients had comorbidities and were not fully vaccinated.
Person who have casualties, they are either unvaccinated or they have received only 1 dose. But those who are fully vaccinated, in that category, death is less. So majority of deaths are seen in the unvaccinated group.
तो इस वक्त केवल वो मरीज जो ज्यादा गंभीर हैं वो अस्पताल पहुंच रहे हैं, जिस वजह से ऐसा देखने में लगता है कि मृत्यु दर बढ़ गई है.
The data and the trend in the national capital suggest that those with comorbidity and those who were not fully vaccinated are the people who are in the vulnerable group or the risk group right now in the national capital. With video journalist Sachin, this is Amit Bhardwaj for India Today from Delhi.
So while Delhi also retains some of those restrictions, so does the southernmost state of Kerala. COVID cases are exploding suddenly in the state of Kerala, recording the highest daily caseload of 46,369 cases, and in just 1 day. The number of COVID tests done went up a total of 1.15 lakh tests that were done in past 24 hours. The positivity rate in Kerala stands at about 40.21%. Take a look at the graphics on your screens, because take a look how the curve was suddenly coming down and a sudden spike has been reported of COVID cases in Kerala. And now, in the wake of these rising cases of COVID-19, the state government of Pinarayi Vijayan has announced more restrictions, tightening curbs in Kerala. What you must know if you are a resident of the state. The next 2 Sundays, which means 23rd January and 30th January, will see complete lockdown, including travel restrictions. What else? We're also being told that malls and theatres will remain completely shut on Sundays. Online classes only for the school students right now, but they won't be completely shut down unless COVID clusters form, which means teachers can go across to schools if the classes commence. Religious functions expected to be held online. Each district administration can decide on new restrictions, including for theatre and bars. So this is what some new guidelines that have come, and this, as you can see, for a sudden spike reported in Kerala.
We have a total of 1,99,000 plus patients now. Only 3% are hospitalized. Among them, 0.7 needs oxygen beds. 0.6% is in ICU. That means that we have the hospital occupancy is very less now. So there is nothing to worry about. But everyone should be very careful. You wear mask, observe social distance and all. So that's it.
So now let's take a look at the neighbouring state of Karnataka, which has decided to open up despite numbers increasing. This is also a state that's reeling under the COVID third wave, but infections, while are multiplying at an unprecedented rate in Karnataka, the state has recorded 47,754 cases in just 24 hours. But despite the surge now, Karnataka government has decided to relax the weekend curfew specifically and with immediate effect. The state government has said that the norms will be reimposed if hospitalization witnesses arise. So what does the data say specifically for the numbers in Karnataka? Have the numbers come down in the state? Let's take a look. Again on your screen, the graph of how Karnataka is also reporting a sudden spike, but there are relaxations. As of January 20, 2,93,231 active cases. What about the home isolation that many people are following now? 2,86,000 cases of home isolation. There have been hospital admissions, that at about 5,344. There have been people who have to even be admitted in the intensive care unit and ventilator. 340 in the ICU, 127 people are on the ventilator with COVID positive cases. And after Karnataka, even Mumbai, the financial capital, witnessing a dip in cases, Mumbai has decided to reopen schools as many parents had been asking, and that starts from next week, which is January 24th, Monday. All COVID SOPs, however, the protocols will be followed. Kerala, on the other hand, decided to shut all schools. So there is a comparison between how different states are reacting. 2 years since schools have gone online, is it time now to reopen schools? Many parents have been asking for, while many say wait for the vaccination to complete. It's a debatable issue. Take a look at this report.
The third wave is peaking at different times for different states. Mumbai, which experienced the COVID surge first, seems to have crossed the peak. The Maharashtra government looked set to lift some COVID restrictions imposed in the wake of the third wave. Mumbai is all set to reopen schools from Monday for pre-primary to class 12 students. The schools will have to follow COVID norms. Schools reopening in other places will be decided by the district administrations.
बच्चों की हेल्थ और सेफ्टी हमारा प्रायोरिटी रही है, तो जब संख्या बढ़ी तो स्कूल को बंद करने का निर्णय लिया गया। हमारा कोशिश यही है कि हम पेरेंट्स से कंसर्न ले सके। बच्चे जो अभी पिछले बार भी आपने देखा होगा, कुछ बच्चे स्कूल में आ रहे थे, कुछ घर पे आ रहे थे, तो किसी का भी बच्चे का लॉस नहीं हो एजुकेशन का, वो हम पूरी तरह से मॉनिटरिंग करने का काम चलाचल विभाग के माध्यम से चल रहा है।
Kerala, on the other hand, has decided to shut down schools from today. Classes will be held online till the COVID surge there is under control. Meanwhile, the centre has advised states to decide on reopening schools after considering the situation on the ground. The pandemic has led to digital divide in education, not only in India but globally as well. After the deadly second wave last year, a UNICEF study showed a shocking digital divide. According to the study, 46 crore children did not have online access to classes. With more than 3 crore people in the 15 to 18 age group getting their first doses, more states could reopen schools once infections drop. Bureau Report, India Today.
What if you're suddenly told that wearing a mask is not compulsory and that vaccine certificate is not important? That is what Europe is considering with a new COVID-19 strategy, accepting the virus as the new normal. The United Kingdom already has declared that the Omicron wave is over and that going maskless, returning to work and doing away with the vaccine passport. Even Spain is laying a new groundwork to treat the next infection surge not as an emergency crisis, but as an illness that is here to stay for a long time. So, are we looking at now perhaps this new coronavirus as the new normal for us, all of us across the world? Take a look at this global package. Mandatory face covering, COVID passes, and work from home guidance. All of this is set to become a thing of the past in a handful of countries in Europe. Infections are falling in some parts of the world, but the WHO has not said the pandemic has moved to the epidemic stage. And that too, if it happens, is not the best case scenario.
Endemic in itself does not mean good. Endemic just means it's here forever. What we need to do is get to low levels of disease incidence with maximum vaccination of our populations so nobody has to die. That's the end of the emergency, in my view. That's the end of the pandemic.
The sword continues to hang over our heads and nothing can be left to chance when it comes to viruses, especially this virus that has mutated hundreds of times in the last 2 years. The WHO has strictly warned against treating the Omicron variant, the fifth variant of concern, as our path to endemicity.
The problem is we are not at the driving seat. It is the virus which is calling the shots. And if you see the Omicron, it has emerged from the original SARS-CoV-2, not from the Delta, Alpha, Beta or Gamma. So we never know when will be the next variant emerge. It may be 6 months or it may be next week.
While experts sound a note of caution, the United Kingdom, one of the COVID epicenters, wants to go about their lives, living the new normal. It hopes to lift the curbs.
The good news is the number of people in ICU has been coming down, certainly in London, which was the epicenter. The level of staff absence in education has remained pretty flat. It was 8% before Christmas. It's at about 8.5% at the moment. So I'm confident that when we review this on the 26th of January, as we said we would do, then we'll be in a much better place to lift some of these restrictions. But it's worth remembering that because we stuck to Plan B, this economy is the most open economy in Europe.
Spain, with one of Europe's highest vaccination rates, has its government laying the groundwork to treat the next infection surge not as an emergency but an illness that is here to stay.
We're fortunate that Omicron, although it is highly transmissible, nonetheless is not as pathogenic, but the sheer volume of people who are getting infected overrides that rather less level of pathogenicity.
In India, where vaccination has picked up pace and region-specific lockdowns continue, doctors say that the virus cannot be taken for granted and the protocols should not change. In the past too, countries lifted the curbs in the hope that pandemic is ending, but each time the virus has made a comeback. Is it too early to predict a return to the normal life?
So what is, in your opinion, the reason behind countries like Europe, Spain is doing it, London is doing it, doing away with isolation, not making face coverings mandatory? What do you think of this move?